Let's have a look at critical discourse analysis, which is one of the recent approaches in the overall field of discourse analysis. Critical discourse analysis, or CDA, focuses on special analytical techniques which help us understand and study the way various social powers, their abuse, and the elements of dominance and inequality are not only produced, enacted, but also resisted by the text, be it spoken or written text. So we see how various socio-cultural discriminations are actually reproduced and resisted by the text. Text not only generates them, represents them, but also sometimes resists them. And one of the aims of CDA is to help readers reveal the hidden and out-of-sight ideologies within a text, which may create certain meanings, a meaning of the choice of a certain maker or producer of the text or discourse, and it may be at certain times harmful or may be questionable in other ways. It also focuses on to unmask ideologically permitted and often obscured positions which are taken to a certain discourse and then promoted through the same discourse or the discourse of the same genre. As a method of research, CDA believes in the systematic analysis and interpretation of the ways in which discourses consolidate power and colonize human mind, how various ideologies or socio-political positions are enacted through discourse. So it believes in critical discourse analysis, and its exponents believe in unmasking those hidden positions through which the minds of an average reader may be exploited. CDA as a method not only includes description of discourse, a certain kind of discourse which includes power and various power relations in the society, but it also focuses on the interpretation as well as explanation of those discourses, and it focuses on explaining why and how those discourses work in a certain society. It takes us beyond the level of description into a deeper level of understanding of various socio-political texts, especially which involve important socio-political topics like power, discrimination, race, etc. Some of the major issues investigated in CDA include the use of discourse in relation to socio-cultural issues, for example, race, gender, politics, identity, ideology. It also looks into why a certain kind of discourse is used to convey a certain position and why not other forms of discourse were used, how that particular form is more effective than the other. There are certain assumptions on which CDA works. For example, language use is always social. So we use language in a certain social context which creates certain meanings always. Discourse both reflects and constructs social reality, words in a real world. Power relations are negotiated through discourse. I mean, we, when speak or create a certain kind of discourse, negotiate our power relations with the people around us or with the surroundings. Discourses are always ideologically loaded. They convey the meanings of the users or consumers of those discourses, and there is always a link between a text and society, and that relation is always mediated. there is something, some ideology, some perspective, some slant behind it. Discourse is historical and a form of social action. So it's not mere words, rather there is a whole world of ideology, identity, or other perspectives which are loaded in a discourse. Some important tools of critical discourse analysis include framing. Framing is how a certain perspective is presented in a certain text or discourse, and what kind of slant or perspective has been taken by the maker or producer of that discourse. Some popular techniques in framing are foregrounding. Foregrounding focuses on what has been emphasized by the producer of a certain discourse. In contrast, backgrounding is what has been de-emphasized or hidden by the producer of that discourse. It can be easily identified in some newspaper or media discourse. We have media discourse do have certain perspectives sometimes, and they convey a certain news item in a certain way which shows their own background ideology or perspective as well. Presupposition is background knowledge of the user and the possible consumer of a certain discourse, and the production of discourses rely on these presuppositions, and a good analyst focuses on the background knowledge or presupposed material which a producer of discourse believes in or might have thought about. Topicalization, what has been put in the front of each sentence to emphasize something. This is an interesting tool to see, especially in newspaper headings. This becomes very important. Agency believes in knowing who initiates the action. Sometimes in political discourse, we see that certain actions are attributed to certain personalities, and the way they are attributed to various personalities becomes very critical. Sometimes agent is completely missing and we know the action only. And sometimes agent is highlighted in brighter colors because we want to give more credit to that agent. So agency becomes very important in the analysis of political discourse. Choice of words is always important in all kind of discourses, but in critical political discourse, it becomes even more important. And we look into the connotations of various words used by the producers of discourses, and the degrees of formality, informality, certainty, uncertainty of the discourse is also very vital to understand certain meanings. CDA also has certain criticism associated with it. For example, some people suggest that the users of critical discourse analysis should include discussions with the producers and consumers of the text. Criticizing or analyzing a text while analyzing it in a library may not produce those real meanings which are in the mind of the user or listener of that discourse. So interaction with the user or listener of the discourse while analyzing a text or discourse becomes very important. So this criticism may be handled by including a component of interaction with the users of a certain text or discourse which is being investigated in our overall analysis. We also have a criticism that CDA does not always consider the role of reader, which may also be handled with. And it is not always detailed and systematic. But if we look at the recent works based on critical discourse analysis, there is a lot of detail which is developing. Overall, we could say that critical discourse analysis in an emerging field, and most of this criticism will be responded in coming years.